Hello, Fame Church, and those who are watching us from across town, from across the state, from across the nation, and perhaps those who are watching us from the shores of distant continents and nations around the world. We are seeing now in the cities and communities of America actions that portray a system of oppression, which is now being responded to by those who have been oppressed and overlooked and left behind far too long. We are seeing burning and we're seeing looting. We're seeing the kind of violence that comes after justice is denied and after oppression has lived in a land and amongst the people far too long. We're seeing the matter that is being demonstrated in the behavior of those who take to the streets and who use their First Amendment rights to assemble and to petition and to protest, to share their disdain and to share their disappreciation and their disapproval of the activities and the characterization of life and the lack of life that America has perpetuated upon the black race far too long. And we might think that what we're seeing demonstrated in the streets across America would be a direct result of the killing or the murder of George Floyd by Derek Chauvin in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We may think that what we're seeing demonstrated in the streets now would be the direct result of the shooting by Travis McMichael of a young black jogger named Ahmaud Arbery. We may think that what we're seeing played out in the violence across the street, around the streets, and in the streets in America and in American cities would be a direct result of the man named Christian Cooper, who was in New York City's Central Park and asked simply a white woman to put her dog back on a leash. And we all saw racism and how it acts out and how it's portrayed and how there seemed to be an idea or mindset of far too many in this country who believe that there is a superiority for whites and that there is an inferiority for blacks. Denmark Vesey in Charleston, South Carolina, in July of 1816, was lynched because he had the common decency and he had the courage to stand up and to ask that there be some sense of righteousness and some sense of inclusion in the acts of American justice for those who are enslaved. We see now that Michael Swerney, a white core organizer and representative, along with James Chaney, a black core representative, and Andrew Goodman, a white core representative, in 1964, who were killed in Mississippi simply because they're being used and they were involved in an effort to make justice run down like water and righteousness to flow like a mighty stream, so that men and women, boys and girls whose color of skin and whose slant of facial features and whose hair differed from that then, which was the majority in America, would be treated on the same basis, treated with equality. We found that, and we go back in history and see that the KKK killed the civil rights activist and the greatest proponent for civil rights in this era, in this last century, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., on the hotel balcony in Tennessee. In April 4th, 1968. We see Trayvon Martin being killed by a vigilante, and Oscar Grant being killed by BART police officers, and Michael Brown and Eric Garner and Ezell Ford and Freddie Gray. These lives were lost, these black lives were lost, and it appears to be that there has been no sense of justice being served for them, and it looks like time and time again, each time this occurs, America comes back, the justice system comes back with the same thing over and over again. Those who caused the life and those who took the life those who caused the death and who took the life, now are justified in the actions and even in the brutal police force that they use. What you see in America and on American streets now is a cry from the oppressed. It's a cry from those who have been left out and looked over far too long. They are exercising their First Amendment rights. We don't condone rioting. We don't condone burning. We don't condone looting. And we don't condone irresponsible lawlessness. But neither can we condone racism and injustice, which has been in this American community for over 400 years, starting even before our nation became a nation in 1776. In September 2018, the President of this United States of America and the United States Congress signed into law a $2.9 trillion tax cut. And out of that tax cut, that 2.9% tax cut was only a part of the 3.4 tax cut that was allowed for Americans across the board. But the $2.9 trillion went to the top 10%, the top 1% of American taxpayers. That means the wealthiest Americans. That 1% represented those billionaires who have more of the wealth now that make this economic system in America to be totally lopsided. The world is now in the midst of global warming, where the fires are getting bigger every year, where whole towns like Paradise, California, can be burned down before it can be extinguished. And also in other parts of the country, especially out west, they're happening and they're getting more and more intense each year. We're finding that there is a coastal erosion where waters and the sea level and small and large communities along the coastal areas, especially in the southern part of the United States along the Atlantic Ocean, those sea levels are rising. We find out and we discover now that the glaciers in the polar regions of the world are being diminished daily, monthly, and annually. And they're going smaller and smaller and smaller. And in a system, in a season, in an atmosphere where we are seeing the proliferation of global warming, what does America do? America opts out of the Paris Climate Accord. At a time when 1.8 million Americans have been infected by coronavirus, and 105,000 of them have died. The number is still climbing even today as we speak. What does America do in the face of COVID-19 and coronavirus deaths that are disproportionate to any that have happened in this nation over 200 years? What does America do? It opts out of the World Health Organization. Black men, who represent now 34% of the inmate population in jails and prisons across America, they represent a community that only comprises 12% of the United States population. That is disproportionate. We are seeing that the criminal justice system is making our prisons to be bulging and growing larger and larger, and they are disproportionately and inequitably occupied and populated by African Americans at the bottom of the national opportunity in this nation. America's national sin is injustice. America's national sin is systemic racism. America's national sin is the resistance and the denial to give opportunity to those who have been oppressed and those who have been left out and locked out and given almost nothing to survive on now over 400 years and 200 plus years, 225 plus years in this nation as a nation in the world. What we are seeing in America, on America's streets, as we saw last night in Denver, Colorado, as we saw last night in New York City, as we saw last night in San Francisco, California, and Chicago, Illinois, what we saw last night down in Houston, Texas, and across the country, is a brand of activism. It's a new brand of activism. Young blacks, young whites, young browns, college students who are out of school now because of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. They are now fed up and tired and sick and tired, and they're standing tall and they're standing toe-to-toe with authorities, asking for denied justice, the justice that has been denied far too long. That is not a this is not a kumbaya moment. This is not a we shall overcome moment. This is a moment where everybody has to stand up and stand tall, stand courageously, and demand that the nation that we live in, the nation that we have citizenship in, will come now to its own senses and bring together this nation in a spirit of concord, where everybody will be looked at and evaluated by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin, not because of their ethnicity, not because of where they were born or what surname they have, but they will be looked at because they comprise the quality of life that represents righteousness and those who are willing to work for the common good of everybody. There are two epidemics in the land. There is the epidemic of coronavirus and COVID-19. There's also the epidemic of a 400-plus year virus of racism. These two epidemics must be addressed. They must be looked at. They must be spoken to, and they must be adjusted and mitigated if life is continued. It is now our opportunity, your opportunity and my opportunity for us to sit down. So I'm asking you to understand that there's no leader in this organization. Everybody's asking who's leading the movement. There are no leaders in the movement. There's no one person you can go to in the movement, because we have learned that whenever a leader of a movement is recognized or rises to the top, then that leader is taken out, is assassinated, and their life is taken. And they expect then that there be a cataclysmic action of a dissipation of the resistance. There is no leader in this movement. The movement is the demand of the people. And I believe the movement now is supported by many things that the Bible tells us. The Bible tells us through Micah 6 and 8 that I'll show you what God demands of you, but to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. God is asking America, based upon the Declaration of Independence, God is asking America, based upon the Constitution, that it declares that all men are created equal, asking them to revisit these documents and live up to the creed and live up to the promise contained in these two documents, so that everybody in this country can enjoy the opportunity that is available for anybody in the community and in the country. Nobody will be looked at as being superior, and nobody will be looked at as being inferior. Everybody will be looked at as a person who comes to the table and who have the God-given right to enjoy all of the freedoms that are in this land. God is calling on America to be a different people. God is calling on America to be a bigger people. God is calling on America to sit down at the table and devise a plan that removes the separatism and that removes the racism, that removes the denial, the systemic denial that has been in this place far too long. So I'm simply asking you, everybody who's listening to this conversation, everybody who hears my voice, I'm simply asking you to call your city council representatives. I'm asking you to call those who represent you in the county government. I'm asking you to call your senators and your assembly speakers and members in the state level. Call the office of the governor. Contact that office. I'm simply asking you to get a hold to your congressperson in Washington, D.C., who represent you in the House of Representatives. I'm asking you to call your senators, and I'm asking you to find a way to get a message to the President of the United States, and also to make certain that it is heard by those who sit in the Justice Department, not only the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. for the nation, but the Department of Justice for the state, and your leaders in the county area. Did you speak to the lead prosecutor? Did you speak to the attorney that represents the wherewithal and the justice for your particular area and your district, the district attorney and those who prosecute cases? Look at them, ask them to come to the table. We're demanding today not action that we've taken far too long, but we're asking and calling for and demanding a new approach. No longer, I'm tired of doing press conferences. I'm tired of standing before cameras begging for and asking for what God has already declared to us is ours. And I'm asking everybody, white, black, and otherwise, young and old, those who understand, appreciate, and love justice and love fairness, I'm asking you to begin now to pray, like everything depends on God, but get up and work and move and protest like everything depends on you. And I'm personally calling those who are responsible leaders in the civil area, in the civic community, our governors and our mayors, and I'm calling upon the chiefs of police and the county sheriffs. I'm calling upon those who represent the troopers and the state troopers and highway patrol in your particular area. I'm calling us to sit down together with leadership, not in the old traditional way, but sit down and talk about change and talk about justice and talk about opportunity that allows for inclusion for everybody. Unless we do this now, there may not be another opportunity for us to do it again. And I'm simply saying to you that what we're seeing in America right now is not wrong. What we're seeing in America right now, we can always know that whenever justice is denied, that the oppressed will always stand to demand justice. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that picketing and protest is simply the voice of the unheard. We have been unheard too long. We've been left out too long. And we're standing now to ask for and demand for justice. And what you're seeing now, disproportionate to any civil unrest that's taken place in this country in the last 200 years, what you're seeing now is simply America being called upon to pay the taxes for the racism and for the injustice that's going on far too long. If we want to stop paying the taxes for the wrong, then we need to sit down and hammer out, work out a new agenda where everybody is included, a new agenda where everybody is given an opportunity, a new agenda where everybody is looked at not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. America, we're bigger than this. America, we're better than this. America, we can do for our young. We can do for those who are yet unborn. We can do by our seniors and for our seniors the things that are right. So this nation and its power, its economic ability and strength can now provide for everybody. And we can rise again to be the leader of the world, because that's what the world looks up to America for, because God has blessed America with so many resources. If God's going to continue to bless America, America has now turned to bless God and to bless the people that it serves. God bless you, and may God keep you in the struggle.